Sometimes it's really weird to think that Castle Crashers came out almost 11 years ago. I mean, this game was so much fun just because it was a unique take on a hack and slash beat 'em up along with an RPG at the same time, and the art design was really unique, having a lot of character ingrained in the art direction while having a sense of humor on top of all of that. So it's been almost 11 years and we've seen releases of Castle Crashers on the Xbox One, and now it's coming to the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4. What happened to Castle Crashers 2? I mean, a game that was as widely received as Castle Crashers obviously should warrant a sequel, right? I mean, we even put this on the list of games that need to have sequels soon video we did a couple of weeks ago. But over the years, Behemoth, the studio that created Castle Crashers along with a ton of other games, have stated that they don't ever plan to make sequels to any of their games. And that kind of was their statement for a very long time. However, in a recent interview, it seems like their tone, while still staying true to the root of what they initially had said and stood by, has slightly changed to maybe question as to whether or not Castle Crashers 2, or something along the lines of a sequel to Castle Crashers, could be in the early stages of development. Of course, with the Castle Crashers remaster coming to Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4, there's obviously going to be a new interest in a sequel to the game, along with more buzz regarding Castle Crashers as a whole and just what Behemoth has been doing. But recently, in a blog post on Behemoth by developer Dan Paladin, he stated that if they were ever to make a Castle Crashers 2, the game would need to be vastly improved upon, rather than releasing another game that is more of the same from what we had in the first Castle Crashers. Now, just that alone is a pretty significant change of pace from what Behemoth has said in the past, where they kind of had the standard no sequel policy across the board. However, they also did go on to reiterate things that they've said in the past, such as, and I'm quoting here, "Another thing to consider is that there would be no Castle Crashers 2 if we started out by making sequels. You'd have Alien Hominoid 2 instead of Castle Crashers 1, or alternatively, there'd be no Battle Block Theater if we made a Castle Crashers 2. And this philosophy kind of does make sense, just because it is true. They have produced some pretty good games over the years by not making sequels. Alien Hominid was a pretty fun game as a whole, but it definitely wasn't as refined or polished as what we got in Castle Crashers, and the gameplay style was completely different. And Battle Block Theater was a pretty fun platforming adventure on its own accord, and Pit People does a really good job at taking that original Castle Crashers vibe and translating it into a different style of gameplay. Still, there's no denying that there is a huge demand for a Castle Crashers 2, just because the first game, besides it just being widely successful, it was extremely addicting and fun, especially for it being one of the early indie developer type games to come out on the Xbox Live Arcade. You know, back then, games that were cheaper were usually considered to be lower quality, and Castle Crashers, while it had a lower price tag than, say, a $60 retail game back in 2008, felt like a high quality experience. I remember being amazed with how long the game actually was, just because up until then, a lot of the arcade games were really short, and it was really nice to have that first playthrough experience, and that game has a ton of memories associated with it. And even then, the replay value with that game is so high just because there's so many different characters to try out, there's a lot of different weapons you can use, and you can really try different things and play with different people that easily keep players coming back to this game. In other interviews, the Behemoth has also gone on record to say that mostly they don't want to spend all this time developing the same type of games over and over again, so they've used this general philosophy of changing things up every time they work on a game, because sometimes these games take 3 to 4 to 5 years to fully develop, and working on the same type of game for such a long time obviously can be pretty draining and would maybe take away from some of the creativity that goes into making a good game. So doing a new type of gameplay is one of their key ideologies in their company. But at the same time, since the release of Castle Crashers, they have put out 3 more games, and like we said earlier, it's been 11 years. Maybe it's time to revisit a gameplay style they've once used way back in their earlier days, and maybe they'll be reinvigorated to make an experience that can be used as a sequel to Castle Crashers that's still fresh and new at the same time. Even if the new game wasn't necessarily Castle Crashers, I think as a whole, fans of the series mostly just want a game like Castle Crashers. Have this very easy drop in, drop out co-op system where you can still play solo and level up characters and try out different characters and try out different weapons and magic and all of that with some sort of charming art style and comedic element to it. If the game wasn't called Castle Crashers 2 but was made by the same people and still followed those general philosophies, it could still make for a pretty great game. They can do a lot of things with different settings, new sets of characters, maybe even a different time period, and then reintroduce the Castle Crashers as DLC characters later on like they've done with the Battle Block characters and others. And I think these ideas that we're presenting here on what they could do with the Castle Crashers 2 kind of line up to their general philosophy. And now they've gone on record with the announcement of the remasters coming to the Switch and PlayStation that they are in fact working on another game, which they are calling just right now Game 5. Personally, I don't believe that this would be Castle Crashers 2 just yet, and we could be wrong about that. Maybe it is a Castle Crashers 2, but based off of interviews dating back just as recently as July of 2018, they've said they had no plans on working on a sequel of Castle Crashers, and if they're already working on Game 5, it probably is most likely something completely new. However, maybe the change in tone in these interviews about potentially doing a sequel one day might mean that their trajectory and idea on what they want to do moving forward as a company is slightly growing and changing, and maybe Castle Crashers 2 is the next project after Game 5, which would mean it might still be a few years before we would see a Castle Crashers 2, maybe even another 5 years, but just knowing that there could be another one on the horizon coming one day is kind of exciting, just because the first game was a lot of fun. Let's also not forget the fact that the achievements surrounding Castle Crashers are pretty fun to get to, and the fact that they had animals and pets in the game, because I had a lot of fun going through trying to collect all of the animals and all of the weapons, and there was a lot of replay value there too. And there's so many other things that they could do in a sequel that have that similar replay value. The idea of having some sort of collectathon also kind of ingrained into the beat 'em up, RPG, hack and slash, whatever you want to call the genre of Castle Crashers. It's really nice that they keep adding things to make their games feel like they're stuffed to the brim. And then once they build that, they make the game charming enough that players keep coming back. Remember how great some of those boss fights looked and the artistic style? Each world you went to and every boss you fought was really unique, and it just made for a really epic adventure, especially if you're playing through it with your friends. This game was just so much fun to play with your friends because it really just allowed 4 players to get together and just have a good time. And some of the things that just happen when you're playing with your friends is hilarious in its own right. And then you get pit against each other and you have to fight each other. And then there's also the PvP elements to the game that are kind of underrated, but if you were going for all the achievements, you definitely did want to play the PvP parts. And as you got further in the game, it felt like the worlds were getting funnier and different with each iteration and each world that was introduced, and it was a really unique experience just because it was something different than other type of games that were trying so hard to be serious and focused in one thing. This game just kind of let loose and did whatever they wanted, and that's why so many people really respected and love Castle Crashers. Either way, we're still really excited that there is a Castle Crashers remastered coming to more consoles like the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4. With the Nintendo Switch, they've announced that there's going to be HD rumble with the controllers, which was kind of the big thing Nintendo advertised with the Switch. Even though it hasn't been something as a core element in a lot of games, it's still a nice feature to have, and it's cool to see that the games are being optimized for whatever console they're on. And with the PlayStation 4 version, the light bar on the back of the PlayStation controller will reflect the color of the character that you're playing, and that's kind of cool too. And with all of that, the remastered version on the Xbox One looked really great, so we're excited to see how it translates on the PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. The portability of the Nintendo Switch is really cool, especially just because the Switch has that pick up and go feel to it, and Castle Crashers really will work great on this system. But either way, we're really excited for the future of Castle Crashers, and we are holding out in hopes that they make a Castle Crashers 2. Of course, if there are any updates on the possibility of us getting a Castle Crashers 2, you guys will be the first people to know here at Rocket Sloth. If you like all discussions on things usually Xbox related or kind of that glory time of the older Xbox days, like the mid to late 2000s. So if you like retrospectives or you like discussions about things that were popular back in the Xbox Live days or the glory days of the Xbox and Xbox Live, be sure to subscribe and turn notifications on. Leave a comment down below with what one key feature you would like to see if they made a Castle Crashers 2, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video.